guys, Amber here. Welcome back. I don't know what happened to my voice there. I kind of went a bit high pitched like that. Welcome back to In Conversation with ATF. That was just my clapboard falling on the floor. My guest today is a writer, and he has written for so many cartoons. I am going to list as much as I can. Some of my favorites include, not obviously limited to, he was the lead writer for the following shows: Ultra Force, Mighty Ducks the Animated Series, Godzilla the Series, Transformers Beast Machines, Action Man, Transformers Animated, G.I. Joe Renegades, Kaijudo? Is that how you...
Yes,
Is that what
pronouncing it correctly.
Oh, okay,
The
okay.
portmanteau of kaiju and Judah.
I was I was gonna ask you if I got it right or beforehand, but it just completely slipped my mind until I just looked at my notes there. I was like, oh. So, and also the Guardians of the Galaxy TV show. He has also written for shows such as Batman the Animated Series, where he has written his Silicon Soul and What Is Reality. He also did the teleplay for Lock Up. He's written for Superman the Animated Series, the episode Fun and Games, and also for shows such as Spider-Man the Animated Series, The Mask the Animated Series, X-Men the Animated Series, Gargoyles, Extreme Ghostbusters, The Adventures of Sam and Max Freelance Police, The Mummy, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003, Danny Phantom, Ben 10, the franchise pretty much, Generator Rex, Transformers Prime, Transformers Rescue Bots, and the Woody Woodpecker web series apparently from 2018, which is quite cool. Obviously, that, as you can tell from the list, we have a lot to discuss, and of course, he's written for films.
I'm going to make one correction. Otherwise, I'll say you're 99% accurate. I was not head writer on Mighty Ducks. I co-wrote one episode.
Uh, that's Wikipedia then,
Yeah,
because it
Dave.
said.
Dave. All right. Well, Wikipedia got David Wise.
Oh, was it David Wise? Oh,
The
right, okay.
was the story editor, head writer, producer, whatever his title was.
Ah, right, okay. I was going to say, because it said uh, lead writing credits in bold, and Mighty Ducks was one of them. So that is my fault, because I got my information from Wikipedia.
That's Wikipedia's fault. It's just your fault for believing
The free
Wikipedia.
encyclopedia that anyone can edit. And also Atlantis, Milo's Return, and a few other films. But who is my guest? You're probably wondering. It's the legendary Marty Isenberg. Hi, Marty.
Hello, Amber.
How are you doing this afternoon?
I am doing great. I got no complaints.
Sweet.
Happy to
Wow.
be here. Happy to fan geek out with you and
It's in my name. Amber the Fango. Yeah.
bring it on.
Well, where do we start with your career then? Let's start with, how did you become a writer? What made you get into writing? Did you always
Oh,
want to be a writer?
I became a writer mostly out of failure to be an actor.
Oh, right.
So
Okay.
this goes back to my college days, or as you would say, my university days.
We also use
And
college
I
over
was
here, so same
Oh,
thing.
okay. Well, I was a theater major, and I initially wanted to be an actor, and I was surrounded by people who were willing to work a lot harder at it than I was,
Mm-hmm.
and had a lot more innate natural talent than I did. So it took me a while, but I realized if I wanted to compete in a creative capacity, it would have to be something other than acting. So I changed my focus to writing and stayed a theater major, but as a playwright, and managed to get a play produced on campus my senior year. So that was the beginnings of my life as a writer. And then I became a professional writer kind of by accident.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After I had long story short, I moved to California, to Los Angeles, to attend a graduate writing program at USC. And after I'd graduated that, I just needed a job. And so I signed with a temp agency. And it was an agency that specialized in putting people in assistant positions for the entertainment industry. So just as a fluke, my third temp gig was with the Fox Kids network just as they were starting up. So I was just there to answer phones. But it turned out that there was a director of programming there by the name of Sidney Iwanter. And Sidney was a guy who liked to nurture and develop writers. And he found out pretty quickly that I was interested in writing. And he said, well, you should try writing for our shows. And I never even really thought about writing for animation, but he handed me a pile of scripts for the shows that Fox Kids was producing. And this would have been the premiere season for Fox Kids. So this is before Batman and X-Men and Power Rangers, before Fox Kids became the powerhouse that it was, and was mostly doing a show called Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates. So I was reading a lot of those scripts.
Mhm.
And he gave me the names and the numbers of all the story editors for their shows and said, here, call them. You can pitch to them if they have slots available. And it took a while, but when Fox got a big order to do 65 episodes of Beetlejuice, that was a show that kind of fit into my sensibilities. And so myself and my writing partner at the time, Bob Skier, we pitched on Beetlejuice, and we ended up writing, I think, 7 episodes of Beetlejuice. And at the time, animation writing was a small enough community that if you did a good and reliable job for someone, word got around pretty quickly. So there was that, and then also kind of having the inside track because I was still working at Fox Kids, so I had all the inside track on their shows. So that's how I would find out about things like, oh, they're going to be doing a Batman animated series. Oh, they're going to be doing an X-Men animated series. So I would have the inside track, and I had a lot of support from Sydney. So I was able to get Bob and I in on a number of Fox shows. So that's kind of how it got started. That's sort of the condensed version of it.
Wow, that's really cool. That is honestly like I didn't even know that you were going to be an actor. Usually, like people who are writers say, "Oh yeah, I definitely wanted to go into writing." Like I rarely had anyone say, "Oh yeah, I was going to go into acting, but then I changed my mind." I was like, okay. But
I would argue that just about all writers are frustrated actors, or at least screenwriters and
They're just
playwrights
writers to
certainly are.
project their feelings.
Exactly.
um, I can see in the background that you've got some cells.
I
What are
have a
those?
few. Yeah, I'll step aside. So
Oh
they're a little
my
crooked right now. These are from Jim Henson's Dog City, which was
wow.
an interesting show. That was the animation was done by Nelvana, but it was a
Uh-huh.
combination of animation and Muppets. So
Ah, right.
there were little Muppet segments that were done in New York at Henson, and those were sort of the wraparounds, and then the main story was animated, and that ran for I think 3 seasons on Fox Kids.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, that was fun. I actually coincidentally was in New York when they were filming one of my episodes. I got to sit in and actually, watch Muppeteers do their art. It was
And,
very exciting.
and what was it like to see them bring your essentially your story to life?
It was. I mean, it was exciting. I've never seen that process. What was interesting to me was when visitors would come to the set, like when kids would come to the set, the puppeteers would interact with the kids, but they would use the puppets to interact with the kids. So the kids could see the human puppeteers, but they were totally focused on the puppets themselves. It's almost like a magic trick where they just draw your attention to the puppet and you just forget about the person. It was really pretty incredible to watch.
Oh, that's really sweet. I mean, as a kid, like for me, because of like how, intelligent I kind of am, like seeing a person with a puppet, I also focus on the person who's controlling the puppet because I see their mouth move and I'm like, hang on, you guys are two people.
It's yeah, I liken it to a magic trick, and it's similar to what voice actors are able to achieve
Yeah,
in the studio, where the person just disappears and they create this this live other person that you can't see, but you can feel.
yeah.
It's hard to describe unless you actually see it happening. But I've always likened it to a magic trick.
Yeah, I'm not a puppeteer, so obviously like this is like kind of me knowing the ins and outs of like Henson and stuff like that. But it does seem like a really fun job. And I'd love to see it in action someday because I've never met a puppeteer in real life, unless I have done, but I haven't I don't know. Unless I have done, but not known. Um
Yeah, and I think in general you
yeah,
don't, if you're seeing something that's Muppets or Sesame Street or whatever on television, you're not seeing the process. You're just
yeah,
seeing the final result. And for people who are doing it, it's fascinating to look at the process.
yeah, definitely. So, the DC animated universe. I've got to bring this up because I personally have a hot. I was gonna say a hot spot. I have a soft spot. Well, it is a bit of a hot spot for discussion, because of how popular it is. And of course, as I mentioned before, you've written for Batman TAS and Superman TAS. Just
Yes.
real quick before I talk to you about it, you've done the teleplay for one of the episodes, and you wrote for two of the episodes. What's the difference between doing the teleplay and being a
Mostly the
writer?
difference is the credit. The episode Lockup, the story had really been generated by Paul Dini. I think gets the story credit. So it was just a matter of Bob and I came in for a meeting for that episode. The story editor was Michael Reeves, and Michael Reeves said, "Hey, we got an open slot. Would you like to do an episode?" And we're like, "Yes, please." And so we came in for a meeting, and basically Paul pitched his idea for the lockup character, and then Paul and probably Alan Burnett was in the room, and Michael and Bob and I, threw some ideas around, and structured a story, and then we wrote the outline of the teleplay. But Paul got story credit on that because he basically created the character.
Yeah. Ah, I see. And of course, you wrote for His Silicon Soul and What is Reality, which is a Riddler based episode. So, what was it like, sort of coming up with the idea for those episodes? Like, how did you come up with the idea of like Batman having a robot doppelganger or Commissioner Gordon getting stuck in one of Riddler's mazes? What sort
Well,
of
I'll,
spun you
I'll,
at
I'll
this?
go in chronological order. So the first one we did was What is Reality. So again, working at Fox, I knew that there was this series coming, and I had seen the promotional animation that they did, and I was just blown away by it. And I snuck a copy of it to Bob, and Bob was a big comic book guy. I was like, we have to get it. How do we get on the show? What do we need to do to get on the show? So we were pitching story ideas constantly, and the virtual reality idea came from Bob. I didn't even know what virtual reality was, and he explained it was brand new technology, and was really kind of wasn't even really existing technology in any serious way. So we had pitched a virtual reality story, and I think we pitched another Riddler story. I'm trying to remember. But the thing that impressed the story editors was in the pitches, we wrote in a couple of sample riddles that were in the way that they had characterized the Riddler. So I should back up is if you're a freelance writer and you're trying to pitch stories on a show, generally you will get a series Bible, which is a description of all the characters and the tone of the show. And there was a very elaborate series Bible for Batman, which included a lot of the character designs. So there was a description of the Riddler and a design for the Riddler, but there hadn't been any Riddler episodes yet at
Yeah.
the time that we were pitching these. Eventually, David Wise wrote "If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich?" But that hadn't happened yet. But
Mhm.
the main thrust of the description of the Riddler was, it's not like the silly kid riddles and puns that you would see on the Adam West show. These are
Mhm.
more like intellectual puzzles.
Yeah.
And that was as far as they went in the description. They didn't really give any examples. So we tried to come up with a few puzzle, a few riddles in that vein, as we were pitching like a 2 or 3 page story. And that caught their eye. Like that was like, oh yeah, we like the riddles. If you can come up, because nobody wanted to write the Riddler there because nobody wanted to come up with the riddles. And I guess my brain worked in such a way that I was able to come up with interesting riddles. So that's what got their attention. And they liked virtual reality as a visual. So that's where the story got the attention of Marty Pasco,
Mhm.
who was the story editor, and Marty was a friend of Sydney's, so we kind of had a friendly audience when he got in there. So he was interested in the story, and then we developed the story with Marty, um, and went from there.
I
Now,
believe the other
Silicon Soul
episode.
was uh,
I
a
think
different
I
scenario.
I
What had
think I know what the
happened
other
was
episode was. Sorry for interrupting. Was the other episode Riddler's Reform?
Riddler's Reform was written by Randy Rogel.
What the Randy Rogel?
Well, there's only one that I know of. Yes,
Oh
Randy
my
Rogel wrote, and then he
gosh.
wrote several other episodes of.
Oh right. I was gonna say because there's other episodes like I know there's Nighttime, but that is from Superman the animated series, and then obviously you've got the Warrior Men and Trial, but he was obviously cameos in that episode. So
Yeah, yeah. So really, those three were the major Riddler episodes that I'm aware of.
yeah, yeah.
And so yeah, so if you're so smart, the first one was David Wise. What is
Hmm.
reality? The second one was me and Bob, and
Oh
then
yeah, Judgment Day. That's the other one. Yeah.
Riddler's Reform was Randy Rogel.
And then Judgment Day. That's the one I've just that I have forgotten the thing in my head. But that was New Batman Adventures. New Batman
Okay,
Superman
I'm not even
Adventures.
sure I've seen that one, to be honest.
Oh, you have to watch it then.
I know they redesigned the Riddler.
Yeah, they did. I don't really like his new redesign. I think they
I
did a
Yeah,
lot.
I like the bowler hat and the yeah
I
and
think just
the blazer. I like
a
that.
lot of the characters redesigned for TNBA were just I don't like their new designs. I'm not a fan of the Joker's redesign. I'm not a fan of course the Riddler's design. Of course the Penguin was redesigned to look like how he looked in the comics because the one from BTAS was based on the Danny DeVito Penguin, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
thought
I
some
like
of them
both penguins
were simplifications because I think the
because of the
animation
Superman
didn't.
because it was the Superman because of the Superman series. They wanted to make the art style similar to that because it was
Well,
sort of.
and yeah, and I think they didn't have as big an animation budget as they did for
Oh,
the
right.
original
Okay.
series, so
Okay.
they did have to kind of
Yeah.
simplify the designs.
Okay.
I thought some of them were improvements. I much preferred the classic Penguin. I thought they went through so many iterations of the Scarecrow, and I think they finally found it
Yeah.
for the anime, for the later one. So,
His
just my
pencil.
opinion.
Yeah. What about his Silicon Soul? Sorry, that's
So
why
yeah, so I
I
was
got a
about
little.
to say Silicon Soul was kind of an interesting case because it's a sequel to Heart of Steel, which was the Hardak computer and the replicants and basically robots replacing people in Gotham. And the original storyboard for Heart of Steel had included, well, I think that if I'm remembering it right, is the script includes a revelation that Hardak is making a Batman replicant. Like that's sort of the big stinger. Like if we don't destroy Hardak, this is what's coming next.
Yeah.
And Kevin Altieri, the director, decided that, well, you don't just show a Batman robot and not have Batman fight the Batman robot. So he storyboarded this really elaborate fight between Batman and the Batman robot that was supposed to go in Heart of Steel Part 2. And had they animated it, I think the show would have run an hour and a half.
Ooh,
So obviously they had
not
to
the
cut it
film.
out after all this work that Kevin had done on it. But subsequent to that, Michael Reeves, the story editor, who was also a story editor on Heart of Steel, brought me and Bob in and said, we got another episode. We think you guys would be good for. And he starts to tell me the whole backstory of the Batman. The Batman versus Batman robot fight, which I already knew about because I'd been seeing the storyboards as they were coming into the network. So it's like we want to do an episode that brings back the Batman robot, and he pitched us the opening scene pretty much as it happens, and he's like, "Okay, where do you go from there?" So again, we batted it around, me and Bob and Michael and Alan Burnett, and we came up with a basic framework for the story, and then we went away and we wrote the outline, wrote the teleplay. But that episode exists because basically Kevin Altieri just wanted Batman to fight a Batman robot. And ironically, Kevin did not end up directing that episode.
Oh no! Oh, that would have been really cool though.
Yeah, I think it was Dick Sebast directed that one.
Ah,
And he
right.
did a great job.
Yeah, it would have made for a great film, as you said. It was obviously cut down and stuff, but I think it would have made a good film plot. To be fair, following Mask of the Phantasm. Yeah.
I wouldn't I wouldn't compete with Mask of the Phantasm. I think that
Oh
was
no, I wasn't trying to say.
pretty.
Yeah, I just say
I don't
like
know that you could come up
exactly.
with a better Batman movie,
Oh
animated or
no,
otherwise,
no,
than
definitely
Mask of the
not. No,
Phantasm.
no. And what about fun and games from Superman the animated series?
So yeah, another similar
It's
thing. It's
obviously
like,
quite
hey,
fun.
we're doing a Superman series, and Alan and Paul called us in and pitched us. Paul pitched us his take on the Toy Man, and sort of a basic framework of the story. And again, we sat around in either Alan or Paul's office and beat it out the story, and then went away, wrote the outline, wrote the teleplay. And that was I can't speak to that one a lot because that was mostly Bob's work on that episode.
Hmm.
So I was in more of an editorial when we would write as a team. Um, Often what we would do is one person would it would be the point man on the episode, and the other one would be kind of an editor on that. So on Silicon Soul and What is Reality, I was the point man, so I did the majority of the writing, and then Bob would do an editing pass on each of my drafts, and then we send it off to the actual editing and producing team. And then on Lockup and Fun and Games, Bob was the point man, and I was the editor.
I see. I see. Wow. Thank you for explaining, Marty. That was really cool. Honestly, like, you've written for so many franchises, like the DCAU, Transformers, everything Disney. Oh my gosh, like I am in awe of you, man. Like I'm so proud of you. Um, the pinball machine in the back, I can see. What's
Oh,
the
okay,
story of the
yeah, there it
pinball machine?
is. There it is.
Oh,
That was
wow.
yeah, that was one of the first purchases I made with money that I made selling an animated script. I think after we'd sold a few Beetlejuice scripts, I saw that there was in an antique store in Santa Monica, and I saw the price, and I'm like, hey, I can afford that. I want that. I'm gonna buy that.
Oh,
So,
well, does it
so it
work?
has it has in addition to just being cool, it's a pinball machine. It also has sentimental value.
Oh, does it work?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Wow.
It's not just a piece of furniture. You can actually play it.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. I see you're spending your money wisely. Because honestly, I would spend it on the same thing too if I saw a pinball machine.
Yeah,
Wow.
practical things like that.
Yeah, 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 of course. Um, the meeting time at the top of the screen because Zoom only gives us 40 minutes free for free users. It's on about 7 minutes now. So the last topic I want to talk about before we, of course, leave and re-enter. Is
And then
the
skillfully edit so there's no, it's
yeah.
seamless.
Yeah, well, I think everybody knows now that it's a limit and stuff, but still. Um, so Woody Woodpecker, I didn't know that you wrote for the 2018 series, and of course, young 14, 15-year-old me was a fan of it because, of course, like I knew a lot of voice actors in it. Um, the first series was voice directed by Kelly Ward, Putsy from Greece, and the whole thing was produced by Mike Young's company, Splash Entertainment. So I want to see lots of connections, and I love it. How did you get involved in writing for that?
That was through Jeff Klein, who's a producer that I worked with on Extreme Ghostbusters and Godzilla and GI Joe Renegades, and I've known Jeff for many years. And I was between gigs, and he said, "Hey, or I think he actually sent like a group email to a bunch of writers he knew and said, "Hey, if you're interested, pitch me some story ideas." And I had the time, so I came up with a couple ideas, and sort of my strategy was, well, let's this is a classic character, goes all the way back to the 40s, so let's pitch story ideas that they couldn't possibly have done back then. So the first thing I pitched was, well, let's do something that takes place at Costco. I don't know if you have Costco over in the
We
UK.
do, we do.
You do. Okay, so I don't have to explain what it is. And I just like the idea of just their Woody Woodpecker and Wally Walrus are battling over the last I think it was a game console or something like that. And just what are all the gags you could do in a Costco? So that Jeff liked that, and we went forward with that. And then I did a second one that they had come up with the story was the Brazil one. So it was mostly just fleshing out the idea. But the thing that I remember about it was I thought I was writing a 5-minute episode, and it turns out no, these are like 2 or 3 minute episodes. So I had to severely cut it down. But yeah, I did get to go to one of the recording sessions. So I was there with Eric Bauza and Tom Kenny, and they did a lot of improv during the session. So a lot of stuff. I wrote more than you could put in 2 or 3 minutes. They recorded more than you could put in 2 or 3 minutes, and somehow it got cut down. But when it finally came out, I was very pleased. I thought the animation was quite good. I was surprised actually at how good the animation was.
If it was in Costco, you should have had them battling out over the last sample, food sample.
We definitely had gags about them, like stopping in the middle of the chase and like sampling cheese or something. I can't
Oh,
remember if it ended up in the final cut or not. But that was a
I'll have to
running gag.
watch it. Oh my
I think
God.
maybe one of them survived. Um,
Ah,
but
well,
yeah, it was just you just throw you throw everything at it, and the best stuff presumably stays in, or at least the stuff that moves the story forward stays in.
yeah, definitely. I know this is going to be a bit biased and it might be hard for you to choose before we get cut off real quick, but what's been your favorite series ever that you've written for?
Oh yeah, it's always like, who's your favorite child? Um, well, I'll give you a few. I think certainly top of the list is Transformers Animated, just because it was such a great experience working with Derek Wyatt and Matt Youngberg and all of those wonderful voice actors, and and the directors and artists on that show. It was really a very enjoyable experience, and I can still look at it and say, hey, that turned out really well. Other things, I'll look at years later, if I look at them at all, and go, yeah, I could have done a better job, or yeah, the animators, we could have had a better budget on that, and the animators could have done a better job, or whatever. But I still can look at Transformers Animated and be be pleased and proud of quite a bit of it. So that's definitely tops of the list. I mean, Batman, just simply the achievement of getting on that show was huge, and being part of such an iconic character who had this long history and certainly was part of my childhood, but also being part of a show that was clearly changing what you could do on television animation and what you could do for a comic book or superhero based show. So that was a big one. And I really had a blast doing Guardians of the Galaxy. It just really um, fit into my sensibilities and my sense of humor, and again, just a fun time. And we got to do a lot of episodes of that show. Unfortunately, a number of the shows that I have fond memories of kind of got cut off too soon, like Transformers Animated.
Yeah.
We were supposed to get a season 4, which we never got. So there's always that kind of bittersweet, unfinished aspect of it. And the same thing with GI Joe Renegades. We were supposed to get a season 2, and that got pulled as well. But Transformers Animated, we got 3 full seasons. So by the time it was over, I could have done more. I would have been happy to do more, but I felt like, okay, we'd done a full series, so that
Yeah.
that was satisfying on that level. The most recent show that I've worked on, which is very uncharacteristic if you look at the rest of my resume, is Octonauts Above and Beyond, which
Octonauts.
and that was a lot of fun. That was and it was very different. And one of the great things about it was that there was so much research involved, because everything on that show has to be, scientifically, factually accurate.
Yeah.
Um, so I learned an awful lot working on that show. So now, you name just about any animal like comes up in conversation. It's like, oh yeah, I did an Octonauts episode about
What about an axolotl? Have you done that Octonauts episode on that?
that. I think they had already done that
Ah,
before.
damn.
So Octonauts Above and Beyond, what was different was it was things that actually took place on land primarily.
Oh,
I mean, we
right.
would still do classic underwater episodes, but the later seasons, kind of the rebrand of the show that's currently out and is actually going to be, I think, what are they calling it? I think seasons 1 and 2 either have premiered or will premiere shortly on BBC, and then seasons 3 and 4 will be premiering at the end of this month.
Ah,
So,
right. Okay.
so yes. So shout out to the UK fans. We can't get it here in the States, but now, well, the first 2 seasons are on Netflix, but the subsequent seasons are back to BBC. So
Ah, right. Okay.
so yeah, so UK fans, tune in. They're great. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, we've come to pretty much a lot of people's favorite franchise, Transformers. Specifically, favorite show, Transformers Animated. Let's talk about
Well,
TFN.
I share their opinion. I really did have a great time
Yeah.
on that show.
Yeah, definitely. Now, of course, there is a lot to talk about that is on my mind right now. First of all, of course, we got acquainted when I met Sue Blue at TF Nation, so she was really lovely. So
She's
of
a
course,
sweetheart.
I know I loved her bits. She's so lovely. So I guess the one thing that's sticking out in my noggin right now is the Trial of Megatron script reading that you guys did for
Okay, so we're
TF
gonna we're
Nation.
gonna skip to way past the end of the show.
So
Oh, we're
just
backwards.
just a quick recap. Which voice actors were involved, and how was
Well,
it? How
and
how did the
maybe
production go to you?
we should give your audience a little bit of context. So
I'll try to explain.
Transformers Animated ran for 3 seasons, and it was supposed to run for a fourth. And we had developed a season arc for a fourth season, and there were a number of things going on behind the scenes that were delaying it. But at some point, because it was a co-production between Hasbro and Cartoon Network, Hasbro had said, just to keep the ball rolling, why don't you write the outline of the 3-part season premiere, which was the trial of Megatron. So I ended up writing that for Hasbro, but not for Cartoon Network, with the assumption that there would be a pickup, and then it would get produced. So anyway, I wrote these 3 outlines for this 3-part premiere of season 4, and then we ultimately got the word that, sorry, we're not going forward with season 4. There were a number of behind the scenes reasons why they made that decision, but the end result was this outline, or these 3 outlines, went into a filing cabinet and were never spoken of again. We cleaned up my office, moved on to the next project. Years and years and years go by, and then I was contacted by the people at TF Nation.
Yeah, so it would have been Billy probably, or David.
Billy contacted me initially, and then he said, I'll get you in touch with David Wallace and we'll figure out the programming. And so David I had actually known because he did a YouTube series in which he would review every episode, and I actually liked his reviews. I thought his opinions were pretty intelligent, and I loved his accent. Just so they were fun to watch. Accent. So he was surprised to hear that I'd actually seen his reviews. And I think I had met him maybe at a convention or two, at a BotCon. So he said, "Yeah, do you have any material that hasn't been seen?" And we'd released little things over the years when we'd done different convention appearances, so there wasn't much left. And I'd always been holding on to the trial of Megatron outlines because I thought, well, maybe someday somebody at IDW will want to bring back animated in a comic book form, and we could adapt that into a comic book. So I'd been holding on to that for that reason. Mm-hmm. And by the time I was speaking to David, it had already been 10 or 11 years. So I figured, we can get it out there, I guess, in some form. So he said, oh, well, maybe we can do a reading and, a live script reading. And I said, well, I don't want to adapt it. I just want to take the outline itself as it existed. I don't want to change it in any way. I want to present it more as a historical document than as a finished thing, which it really isn't. So as we were talking about it, I was saying, boy, wouldn't it be great? I think I had just done the TF Con in Burbank, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we got some of the original voice actors to do a reading? And David said, well, we could get them to record their parts. Do you think anybody would do it? And I said, well, I know David Kay will do it because he shows up at all the conventions.
Oh yeah,
and and so we'd probably talk a few others into doing it. So I said, let me reach out to some people and just see. So I reached out to David, and he was on board, and I reached out to Sue, and she was on board, and then Sue was, of course, invaluable because she got me all the contact information for everybody else. So I reached out to pretty much I think the only one that I didn't make an attempt to reach out to was Judd Nelson, because I thought, that's too big a name.
Yeah. Everybody else, Coleman was in it. Oh yeah, Townsend Coleman was
Townie,
in it.
yeah. Townie was on board right away.
Yeah.
So it just, and some of it we had to reach out through agents, but everybody said yes. which just floored me. I said, we don't have any money for this. It's just, just can you do it as a favor?
Dude, we're getting the
And a
band back
lot of
together.
most voice actors have their own little home studio setups, which aren't as the sound quality isn't as great, but it wasn't because it wasn't for broadcast or for anything like that. It
Yeah.
was just for a convention. People were less concerned about it being 100% clean sound. So a lot of them just did it in their home studios and sent us digital um, and um, and Tom Kenny, I think, all right. Tom Kenny was also voice directing on SpongeBob at this point, as well as
Yeah.
being SpongeBob.
Because he took over from Andrea Romano. Sorry.
Yeah. So Tom said, "Oh, I can probably tack it on after a session. I can do my part, after a SpongeBob session." And somehow
Yeah.
that changed to, can we use like a little like it wasn't a full studio, but it was like a studio that voice actors use for their demo reels or for their audition tapes.
Yeah.
um and it just so happened that Tom and David Kay were available at the same day at the same time, so we recorded the two of them in person. So I was actually there for those records and
Ah,
directing them a little bit.
that's so cool.
Um, and David found some money in the budget to pay for some studio time. And then, to much to my shock, Corey Burton said, "Oh, I'd love to do it. I want to do it I need to do it in a studio. I can't. I won't just do a home demo or anything like that."
Uh-huh.
So again, I went to David and I said, "Well, is there any more money in the budget to do this for Corey?" And David is a huge fan of Corey, so he said, "For Corey, we'll find the money." So they got the money, and Corey said, "Could you please come in and direct me?" And I said, "I'd be thrilled." So again, this is we haven't worked together in 10 years or however long it had been since we'd done the last record. And Corey is so meticulous and specific in his work. The first thing he says to me is, "I made sure we got the same kind of microphones that we had back in 2007." Like, first, but then he remembered that he knew, but he said, "I requested it had to be these microphones." So yeah,
That's
so I got
that sounds like
to
Corey. That sounds like
yeah, so
Corey.
I got to direct Corey, and yeah, it was a little emotional. Like, it was we went right back into it. I had recordings for reference, because I didn't expect everyone to remember exactly how their voices went. And yeah, it was delightful to do that in person with at least a few of the actors. Um, and then we didn't for the convention, we didn't announce that who would be reading. We just said there was going to be a reading of Trial of Megatron. I think we said
Oh,
that it was the unused outline for the
season
canceled
four.
series,
Yeah.
season 4. So there's a lot of excitement around that, and then we kind of did this fake out where David came up and said, "All right, now I'm going to read the outline."
Was
And he
this at TF
starts to
Nation?
read, just he himself, just David himself is going to read the outline. And I said, "Well, okay, if that's what you want to do, but I took the liberty of making a few calls, and then suddenly they put on the screen. I forget who the first voice actor was. It might have been Bumper Robinson, and then everybody had recorded greetings to TF Nation, and suddenly the crowd in there just went wild. I
Oh,
I don't think, no, you can hear the recording on the I think that's available on YouTube.
yeah, the recording
But the
is. I don't.
actual live in the room thing, I think David had sent me a little video piece of that, and it's really fun to watch.
Oh, you'll have to send it. Well, I'll ask my friend Raymond because he's known for taping the panels at TF Nation. So I'll ask if he's got a copy. Yeah, you know, what, I'll ask him right now. And if he doesn't have a copy, would you mind sending me a copy of the little intro?
I'd have to dig it out. I'm not sure I still have it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
How I wish I was there. I would have gone crazy. That would have
There
been fun.
were, yeah, no, and you can hear some people like in the audio, like people like they sound like they're weeping. It's kind of there, you know, people just have just this strong visceral reaction to hearing those
Uh,
voices again.
just
So
Tara would have
that was very
been
exciting.
great for it. Tara would have been great for it. Just hearing just her just start going into things like just talking and then just like everyone just goes crazy. Just
Yeah, and again,
nothing
if we
happier
had
than
had
hearing
more
people
time, she
cheer.
would have done it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just we ran out of time.
yeah, yeah, of course. So oh my gosh, what was it like writing for Transformers Animated? Of course, you wrote some really good episodes. So I know Garbage In, Garbage Out is one of my favorites. Of course, because
Same here. That's also one of my
Spike and
favorites.
Carly appear. Which I think what came about, what was were you the one who put them in the script, or were they like already in the episode?
You know, things would evolve over time. Usually, things would happen as a result of conversations with Derek and with Matt. And I think, you know, this is going back a few years, so I'm not necessarily remembering the details of what when. I think I may have had the sequence, just the idea that Ratchet in vehicle mode has to pick up a pregnant woman and deliver her, you know, to a hospital. And then, you know, as we're talking about it, because I think they'd already Spike and Carly had already and it forgetting the names. Sparkplug, I think was the kid.
Sparkplug, no, Daniel.
Daniel, thank you. Thank you. My aged brain. Yeah, I think they had already Derek had already put them in as background characters. And so I'm sure it was Derek who said, "Well, what if it's Carly who's pregnant with Daniel's brother?"
Oh,
So it's like, yeah, let's do it. And then when we got to the recording session, Sue, of course, cast Corey as Spike because Corey had done the voice back in the day. I remember it was a little bit of a challenge for Corey to kind of get his voice to that young Corey timbre, but
yeah.
he nailed it. So yeah, so I'm pretty sure it was Derek who suggested bringing Carly and Spike in.
And
So
then
little nod to the G1.
yeah, and then of course you got Tora to voice Daniel and Carly, because who else can do a little boy voice and as well as a motherly voice?
I can't remember. Did Daniel even talk in that one?
Yeah, they're not in that episode, but there is. I think there was
Maybe oh,
you
in
know those
another one.
little
Yeah, well, he was like a
shorts
party
things.
guest at her
Yeah,
birthday
it was in
party.
one of
That
the
was the one. Yeah,
shorts. Yeah. I
yeah.
was gonna
Okay.
say, yeah, because those shorts that were leaked online by Kean Carlisle, you obviously well not I wouldn't say leaked. Leaked isn't the right term, but he posted them online. You know, it was like I think one of them was like Starscream or something like that. So what was the story behind these? Were they just not released to the public or were they screened at
Well,
convention?
yeah, we had there was I'm not sure why we did the shorts initially, just with the idea that they might have been little interstitials for
I
Cartoon
presume that.
Network
I presume that.
or little bonus things for video releases. Like they didn't really have a specific home, but there was a budget for them. And I think that was all tied into the budget for the transformation cutaways. You know, they were able to one of the budget savers was we got these really well animated transformation sequences that you know you could sort of cut in strategic moments, so you could see a really good looking transformation as opposed to a really kind of blurry, you know, in and out of it.
Yeah.
Um, And I think that those shorts were all tied into that to that budget because I'm pretty sure it was the same animation company. I think Studio 4C maybe was them. This is a question for Matt Youngberg and not for me. But I just remember that okay, we're going to do 10 comedy shorts, like two little 1 minute, 30
Yeah.
second, maybe 2 minutes tops.
Yeah.
So I just wrote a bunch. The one where they're watching the mime doing like the robot moves and commenting about it.
Yeah.
That was something I had written just kind of as a almost like to workshop the character voices. So very, very early on, maybe even before I wrote the pilot, I just did a little, kind of a little comedy sketch with Sorry and Bulkhead and Bumblebee just to sort of get their dialogue voices down, and thought, yeah, maybe Cartoon Network would do it as an interstitial, just kind of throw it out there. So I was able to. I think the version I wrote was a little longer, so I cut it down for the shorts. And then just other ones were sort of ideas that we batted around, and something like things that some of them were just like gags that I would think of like the day I wrote them or something like that. So they all wound up in different places. I think one ended up as something you unlocked in the Game Boy game, and some of them maybe were bonus content on some of the DVD releases. And I had just assumed that they had all been released. I didn't realize that there were some that hadn't been released. So Kian had mentioned it, and I said, well, I think I have a DVD of them somewhere. Um, and he's like, can you bring it? Can you show it to me? So I dug it out, and yeah, I slipped him a copy, and he said, can I post it? And I said, I can't give you permission to post it. I also can't stop you from posting it. So that's entirely up to you. So if the Hasbro lawyers come after anybody, they're going to have to come after Kian.
I love the short where it's like Starscream's making fun of Megatron while he's giving a speech, and he's like behind him, he's doing like bunny ears and stuff. That's
Right,
probably my
right.
favorite. Yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, I love the writing for those. Not probably a lot of people probably don't know this, but you were actually you have voice acted a little bit yourself because you provided the scratch track for Optimus before David Kaye was brought in.
Yes, yes, I did, and I have showed that clip at conventions a couple of times, where when we were doing the test animation for animated, it wasn't cast yet, and we didn't have a voice budget for that test animation, so we literally sat in a conference room with, I want to say it was a cassette recorder, but I don't think it was. It was probably a digital. It may have been somebody's phone. I don't know. And so, yeah, so I was Optimus and Bulkhead. Derek was Nanosec. Aurelio Maramba, one of the directors, was Prowl. Matt Youngberg was the reporter, and then my daughter Sarah was Sorry. She we were going to use one of the PAs, and I said, I happen to have an 8-year-old girl at home. Would you like me to bring her in and record the voice? And they said, sure. So she came in, and she was immortalized briefly
Oh,
in animation.
oh wow. Oh, what? So I'm presuming like she grew up watching like the shows you
She watched
wrote.
some, and she came to a couple of the voice records, when like she was
Oh,
on, break from school or something. So yeah, so she got to know some of the voice actors, and I
is
don't
she your
think she was
age?
there the day that Tara looped over her scratch track, but
So is
um,
Sarah your only child then, or have you got
no,
any other
I
children?
have 2 daughters.
Ah, right. Okay. So I'm presuming they've both grown up with your work. Of course, Sarah has. Yeah.
Yeah, although most of my work is actually geared toward boys. So they
Mm,
weren't as interested in my stuff. I think
yeah.
they started to get interested when I did Danny Phantom because that was on Nickelodeon, so that was
Uh,
more
yeah.
something they were watching. And then I think they got interested in seeing the shows that they came to voice records for. But
Ah,
they didn't really watch a lot of my stuff. So,
I see.
but that's
I
fine.
see. Yeah, yeah, that's fine. I
They
mean,
developed their own tastes independently.
yeah. Well,
But
I mean,
Dad
with
was
me,
writing.
with me, I don't, I'm not that into girls shows. I mean, I like them, but it seems that most of the shows that I am or I have been into in the past few years have been geared towards boys. So obviously Transformers, and then you've got G.I. Joe, and then of course Batman the animated series, and then like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all that stuff, it's sort of geared towards boys. And yeah, everyone can enjoy them. Yeah. I mean, who's stopping anyone from enjoying them just by, being the opposite of the gender demographic? Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just didn't want to foist my stuff on them. If they,
yeah,
if they
yeah,
came
yeah,
to it independently, I would be happy to continue to share with them. But I
yeah,
preferred for them to develop their own tastes and
yeah,
their own
yeah.
interests.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. What was it like to work with Derek Wyatt? Of course, we lost him 2 years
Yes,
ago
yes, and
this
that was a
December.
huge, tremendous loss.
Yeah.
It was a delight to work with Derek. I never met him or worked with him prior to that,
I love
and
his
I
art
just
style.
felt like he was the heart and soul of the series. Like
Yeah, I
I
love
had,
his art style. It's so unique. It brought, like I
oh
said,
yeah,
new life to
it
the
just
brand.
every character had personality right there on the page,
Yeah.
and I had already written the pilot episode was actually the nanosec episode. That was the first thing to be written. And this was before Matt was involved. This was before Derek was involved. So I didn't start writing the origin, the movie Transform and Roll Out until after the team had been assembled. So I was writing Nanosec blind. I mean, there were no character designs at all. And then Derek had started to do character designs. And when I saw his character designs, it was like a light bulb went off. And I was like, oh, this is the tone of the show. This is how the show needs to feel. So yeah, I just feel like he more than anyone really defined what that show was and what it became, and he really, he kept it alive. He was the one who spearheaded. We did a few comic book stories for botcons and things moving forward, but he was always the one spearheading that. So if anything, the really the strongest force carrying the torch for the continuation of that show was Derek. And I just think he had, the strongest fan following as well.
Yeah.
So and just, couldn't be a nicer guy. Just, easy to work with, get along with. Just a wellspring of ideas, and had such a love and a fondness for that property.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, what was nice is it wasn't so G1 centric. Like he loved all the incarnations of it. He saw value in all of them. I think probably his favorite was at the time was Beast Wars. But the thing that surprised me was that he actually liked Beast Machines, which was of course one that I was involved with,
Yeah.
that got a lot of fan backlash, and particularly fan backlash from people who love Beast Wars. So just the fact that he saw something of value in Beast Machines, it's like that immediately, made him okay in my book. I figured that he's what was nice, like unlike a lot of fans, major fans of Transformers, he wasn't so locked into what one version of it should be. And he was very much of the mind of we need to make this its own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Bless his soul. So the meeting, the countdowns come up again, saying like 10 minutes and stuff. So I know, yeah, I know it's crazy, like just the time limits Zoom gives you. Um, so I was wondering, maybe in the future, would you like to do a part two? So this episode could be DC and Transformers, and then the next part could be other stuff that you've written and everything like that.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Yeah,
I'll keep going as long as you want me to.
yeah, okay. Well, I was gonna say because just coming out and coming
I
back
fi-
in again.
just I figure I got, a tops another hour for you today. But
That sounds good to me. Okay then. Well, let's keep
you want
going.
if you want to split it into two, or if you want to do a supersize episode, that's up to you. I will bore your audience as long as they can stand it.
Go on then. We'll do a two-parter. So really, just to round off the last 5 minutes before the whole outro. Um, Working on, of course, Beast Machines, Transformers Prime, and Transformers Rescue Bots. What was it like to work for those shows? Of course, because you had like Frank Welker and Peter Cullen. Obviously, we're not in like obviously like Prime and then Rescue Bots and Peter Cullen. Have you met any of them, Frank and Peter?
Yeah, I worked with Frank. The first time I worked with Frank was on The Mask. He was the voice of Milo the dog.
Oh,
Because
right.
that was at a time where Frank wouldn't do human voices. He would just do barking and animals and things like that. And occasionally, like, he would do a supporting character, a one-off character for an episode. But for whatever reason, he was just like, I'm just doing animals now. That's all I do.
It's in my contract.
And then I guess D. Bradley Baker kind of took that franchise over from Frank. Um, but so yeah, so I'd known Frank from The Mask, and with Peter, I had only met when I went to some recording sessions for Prime, and of course, it's that iconic duo. Um, but when we were casting on animated, we were in a position where we couldn't. First of all, we were doing a younger version of Optimus Prime, which Peter just wouldn't have been right for.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think, there was some talk about should we try and get him, put him in another role. But my understanding was, and this was true of Frank too, is that Frank would only be interested in doing Megatron, and Peter would only be interested in doing Optimus. At least at the time,
I
that's
was
what
gonna
I was
say
told.
he was then Soundwave in the 2015 Robots in Disguise. Megatron didn't appear in that, but I think it's because Megatron didn't appear in that show altogether. So Frank was just
Yeah, and
Soundwave.
things changed, but at the time that we were casting animated, that was the understanding
Yeah,
that we had. So if we weren't going to ask them to audition for anything, and they really weren't interested in doing anything other than those iconic characters. So
yeah,
that was actually nice. That gave us free reign to reimagine those voices.
yeah,
Um, and it was quite challenging to cast Optimus for that very reason. And it was only kind of a fluke that Derek was interested in having David read for Megatron, because Derek was such a huge fan of Beast Wars and Beast Machines.
mm-hmm.
And I said, well, yeah, but David's Canadian. And Sue said, oh, no, he wants to come move to Los Angeles and start a career in LA. So he'd be interested in auditioning. So we auditioned him for Megatron, and it was kind of the same thing that he did for Beast Wars, which was fine, but it wasn't what we were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we just kept hitting a wall with finding the right voice for Optimus. And I just remembered hearing, like, David's audition tape starts with, "Hello, I'm David Kay, and I will be reading for the role of Megatron." And I listened to that again, and I thought that could be a voice for Optimus, just his regular speaking voice. So when we were doing the callbacks, we brought him back in and had him read for Optimus, and David describes it better than I do because it's much more interesting from his side of the booth, where he's just first of all shocked that he's even being asked to read for the good guy. But it was, we heard it and it's like, this could work. This is, and we were, as it kept going, we were getting more and more excited about it. So that was a big, a big relief for us, because otherwise we just did not have our Optimus.
Yeah, and how, we'll make. I'll restart the meeting after you've answered this next question. Um,
I'll try and answer it quickly.
how was Corey Burton cast as Megatron?
Again, everybody did auditions, and we had a number of good candidates for Megatron. But Corey's was very different, and I remember my first reaction to his Megatron, and I can't remember whether it was his. I don't know if we heard an audition tape for him, but I remember in the callbacks hearing his Megatron and just thinking, this guy sounds like he's 1,000 years old. He just sounds weary, and it just hit me as like, this is it. This is different from anything I've heard for this character. Because Frank's version was very kind of shouty.
Yeah,
I think he for Prime he kind of toned it down. It was kind of more in that
yeah, I was singing on his voice. Yeah,
weary, so I really liked what Corey was doing with it. And we had a lot of good actors to choose from. But I kept going back to Corey. So I was a big proponent for Corey. I don't remember if it took very much convincing for Derek and Matt, but that was, yeah, that just drew me. The other thing was that we needed to cast for versatility, because we didn't have a huge voice budget. So, and we had a huge cast, because you have all these Autobots and all these Decepticons. So, the majority of this cast has to be able to double, do at least two major characters. And so we really liked Corey's Ratchet. So we were okay, Megatron Ratchet, we're covered. And so that's Tom Kenny could do a bunch of voices. Corey could do a bunch of voices. David could do a bunch of voices. Bumper, we didn't realize at the time, but he could do a bunch of voices. So we had a lot of versatility in that cast, which we needed. So that was also part of the casting process. It's like, well, we kind of like his, whatever Decepticon character voice, but I don't think there's an Autobot character for him. And we almost cast Jeff Bennett as Optimus, because we liked his prowl, and we loved his Captain Fanzone. If we didn't get David, I think that might have been the direction we went. But that was the huge thing, is everybody had to be able to handle a lot of characters, because we weren't going to be able to hire a lot of actors.
so Rescue Bots. Of course, this was like a completely different show, because of course this Transformers show was aimed at a preschool demographic. So what was it like writing for that? Was there some stuff that you couldn't write about? Of course, there were no Decepticons in the show, so there wasn't really any villains or anything that you could write for.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, it was really my first experience with anything that could be considered preschool. So it was definitely a different kind of thing for me. But of course, we had the familiar Transformers world to it. I thought that Nicole Dubuque did a great job in just sort of developing this very whimsical concept for Autobots. I felt like there was a little bit of a kinship with animated, in that kind of lighter touch and that kid-centric touch. So I could appreciate that. And I was working with Greg Johnson, who as a story editor, and Greg had worked with me on GI Joe Renegades, so there was a lot of familiarity there. We were all kind of in the building for Hasbro Studios. Um, I think I uh, may have been doing Kaijudo at the same time as well, and I had just done some Transformers Prime, so there was always a lot of chatter between the writers, and there was always kind of the possibility that maybe GI Joe
Yeah.
Renegades would get a second life. So I was still around, even though I wasn't working on I wasn't attached to any one show in particular. But yeah, it was fun to work on. I think one of the challenges was that every character, regardless of the story, every character, which meant every bot and every member of the Burns family and Cody and the supporting character, everybody had to have a moment. So you just had to cram so much in to give everybody their moment.
Yeah.
But it was fun to do, and I did a few more. I think a couple of years later, in later seasons with Steve and Sydney Granite were the story editors then. And that I think by that point the show had a little more of its voice, so it was a little more of a streamlined. Just here we're going to do this, this, and that, and this is what the story's going to be, and just run with it. And by that time, I think there was, things had loosened up a little bit, so there could be a little more, maybe not, I mean, not Decepticon villainy, but I know I did one story that dealt with like thieves,
Yeah.
so which I don't think we couldn't have done. I don't think we even could have done anything like that in the first season. So that had loosened up a bit, but it was a fun show to write for.
Yeah, and I find it really lovely how, like, back in the 80s, you had Transformers and G.I. Joe running alongside each other. Then you had Transformers Prime and G.I. Joe Renegades. So it was like really, it went from 2D to pretty much like the modern day 2010 sort of transition. It's like both of them were adapted to a modern age audience. Like, I think I found that really cool that they kind of ran alongside each other in two different sort of separate year spans.
Yeah, I think one of the other challenges of writing for Rescue Bots was because of the animation that they were using. It was there were a lot of limitations. So there were just
Mm-hmm.
you would call for some action sequence and basically be told, no, they can't do that. That's much too complicated. We have to keep these things really simple, just in terms of what the characters are able to do, and in terms of how many how much, what kind of props they could interact with. So there were a lot of challenges there that you had to work around. It was sort of similar to the experience on writing for Beast Machines, which was very early TV computer animation, and it was fairly primitive. So you actually, we actually had, before we even came up with stories, we were given a list of characters and say, this character has to be introduced in this episode and not before, because we won't be able to render them in time.
Yeah.
So there was a whole bunch of hoops. You just had practical hoops that you had to jump through in order to meet the production limitations. So that's something that's something you learn along the way. Is, in theory, animation, you can do anything, and that's true if you have a big enough budget.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you're sort of writing around what the animation and what the budget can actually afford to do.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a lot of horse trading and a lot of compromises you make. As well, if we include, if we get rid of these locations, can we get this extra character in? And there's a lot of that. Um, that's not necessarily the creative part of writing and storytelling, but it is a practical necessity.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, come on then. What about Beast Machines? I need to Beast Wars. I was like, so confusing between the two. Of course, we've got to
Uh,
talk about Beast Machines. It's the other Transformers show that you've written for, of course.
is the other Transformer show.
It was the
Um,
first Transformers show you wrote for.
that's true. That's true. And we were brought in primarily because we didn't know anything about Transformers. They really wanted a fresh take on it, so fresh that we had to quickly cram just on Beast Wars. And interestingly, we couldn't really do that much research on G1 because the episodes weren't available. They weren't the home videos were out of print, and they weren't running anywhere, and there was no YouTube at the time. So we had to rely, other than the Transformers the movie, that was the only thing that was available on home video. We really just had to rely on the memories of others, of
Yeah.
what had been established in G1, and
Mhm.
those memories of others weren't always accurate. So we ended up discovering things pretty deep in the process, that were previously established, that were not the same as what we were saying they were, because this was um, the first Transformer series since the original that actually took place on Cybertron.
Mm.
And we were told that other than the movie, other than Transformers the movie, there had been no episodes or scenes set on Cybertron in the original series, because we didn't want to be 100% slavish to what had been come before, but we didn't want to directly contradict anything that had
Yeah.
already been established. And it was only really after begging and cajoling, and they literally had to like go into an archive somewhere, like in a uh, literally like in a mine in Pennsylvania, where they were storing all of these original copies of these in the master copies of these videos, to get, because we discovered in the primitive early days of the internet that there were episodes that did take place on Cybertron, and there were things that had been established. So we kind of had to retcon as we went and say, well, this thing that we were calling the Oracle, that was actually Vector Sigma, and it got renamed, and things
Yeah.
that it meant it was important to us that that we be at least accurate in the naming conventions of what had come before. But we got a lot of flack from fans,
Yeah.
and I complete ignorance. We just didn't know. We didn't know that much about the lore, so
Yeah.
we had to pick it up retroactively.
One thing I do love, going back to Transformers Animated, is your little human OC that was inserted into, I can't, was it Human Error? Is that the episode where the characters get turned into humans?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And sitting at the table is a character that looks exactly like you. Was that designed by
Yeah,
Derek,
well,
or was
that
that?
was human error started in basically started in Derek's sketchbook, where he was just fooling around, because there was in G1 there was a show where some of the Autobots got turned
Yeah,
into humans. So he said, "Oh,
that's
what if we
correct.
did that? What would that look like? Just kind of as an artist exercise. What would that look like if our characters turned human?" And so I looked at that and said, "Oh, we got to do that." So for by the time we got to season 3, we worked a story around that, um, and so that concurrent with that, there had been caricatures of other crew members that were put in as background characters. And I said to Derek, I want to be a character in the show. Put me in there. So he said, "All right, give me a picture of you, and I'll draw you in there." So I got him a picture, and he had a picture of me like on his desk for months and months. So somewhere he said, "Don't worry, I'll get you in there somewhere." So finally, yeah, he got me in at Human Error, and yeah, and I still use that caricature for my business card and for most of my like online. If they want an image of me, I usually go with that rather than a photo.
Yeah, I'm literally looking at the TF wiki page now because honestly, it's just so cool. Like, apparently, it was your goal to make animated the most fun Transformers series ever.
And it was, and
Definitely was, yeah, one of my
in my
favorites.
humble opinion, I think we succeeded. I mean, that's really up to the audience to decide, but it was certainly the most fun for me.
Yeah, definitely. Ooh, it's just it gives out so much trivia. It said that you were meant to attend BotCon 2000, but you didn't end up attending. And you did BotCon 2008, 2011, 2014. What TF nations have you done? You were at the 2019 one, right?
That's the only one.
Was that the only TF nation? Did you ever do
That's
auto
the only
assembly?
TF Nation I did was 2019.
So yeah, you haven't done you didn't do auto assembly then.
No, no, that's just 2019 was the first time I'd ever been invited.
Ah, right. So like when you say about the TF Nation panel for the script reading, you said something about David K doing the outlining. What was he at T? I don't was he at the event or was it just you?
No, David wasn't there that year, but David had been to pretty much every BotCon and every TF con that I had attended. So I just knew that he was a big fan convention
Yeah.
guest and attendee. So yeah, so just when the discussion had come about getting some of the original actors, I figured, oh, David would definitely do it because
Oh
he's
yeah.
he's someone that um, would always go to conventions. So that, but no, he was not at BotCon 20 or uh, TF
TF
Nation
Nation. Ah,
19.
okay. So the final big question for part one is what are you doing these days, Marty? Are you still writing for shows, or what's going on today that you can talk about? Because of course
Well,
there's a
yeah,
sad strike going on.
you're probably aware that there is a writers and an actors
Yeah,
strike
right.
going
Yeah, I was
on,
gonna say if
which
there's anything
doesn't,
you can say because of the
yeah,
strike.
well, it doesn't directly affect animation. It's a little complicated, but animation writing, most of animation writing, at least kids' animation writing, is not covered under the Writers Guild, which is on
Ah, right.
strike. It is covered under the Animation Guild, which is not on strike. And then with the actors, it gets even more complicated because my understanding is that voice actors are allowed to do voices for television animation under the rules of the strike, but not for feature animation because I don't know, I guess it's two different contracts or something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
It is confusing enough for me, and I'm sure it's very confusing for the studios. So I think the assumption is that everybody's on strike, or even if they're not on strike, they're not working and they don't want to cross picket lines, even though technically they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So that coupled with the fact that there's just been really a cutback with a lot of shows being greenlit or being given pickups for additional seasons. So it's a very, very slow time in the industry right now,
Yeah.
which is my long-winded way of saying I haven't been doing that much these days. And what I have been doing, I have NDAs that I've signed that I can't really
Yeah.
talk about. So,
That's totally
so but
understandable.
as I said, the most recent thing I've done that I can talk about is Octonauts. And it's premiering on BBC very soon, so everybody should
Ooh.
watch it. And that was a lot of fun. I did 3 seasons of that, which kept me very, very busy during the pandemic, which was nice to be busy
Mm.
with something during the
Oh yeah.
pandemic. So that's been good. So yeah, so check out Octonauts.
Sweet.
Octonauts Above and Beyond, I should say.
It'll be on BBC iPlayer and CBeebies for those of you for obviously in my
Yeah, it's not on
UK.
BBC America, so we can't see it here.
Ah,
But
rats. Yeah, I think it would have been. Yeah, couldn't they put it on Netflix or something?
well, the first two seasons of Above and Beyond are on Netflix. I'm not sure how much longer they're going to stay on Netflix with because they're going on to BBC. There may be some simultaneous appearance of both, but my understanding is that the subsequent seasons are not going to appear on Netflix.
So, Marty, thank you so much for joining me on my little show. It's been such a pleasure to be your host, to talk to you, and just to listen to everything that you've done. And we will definitely do a part two in the future where we'll talk about your career that is not Transformers or DC Comics or Woody Woodpecker.
I guess there's still a few things I could talk about.
Yeah. And who knows? The strike might have ended then. I don't know. Who knows? So where can we find you on the internet? Do you have any social media?
Well, I don't keep a separate fan site for Facebook or for LinkedIn, but anybody who wants to reach out to me, such as yourself, can direct message me on either of those. And if you have a question, if you have a specific question about anything I've worked on, I am happy to respond. But I don't maintain an online fan presence, so I
That's totally
don't think you'd
understandable.
find my vacation pictures that interesting on Facebook. So
I would. I never leave the house. I'd be like, oh, what's the outside world like? Oh, nice and sunny on the beach in the Bahamas and everything like that.
just open your door and you can see
Ah,
you
that's
can
the
see the
lovely stuff.
but I do make it a point that if anybody makes the effort to reach out to me and I'm not that hard to find through Facebook and through LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to respond. So
Sweet, wonderful. Well, in that case, thank you everybody at home for watching part one of In Conversation with ATF Marty Isenberg edition. We will be let me put my teeth in. We will be back in the future with a part two, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'll sign off here. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you around. It's bye from Marty and bye from me. Bye. And cut.